Later in the programme, we're going to be talking to a man with a disability, David, who is worrying about the loss of his personal independence payments as a result of the Spring statement last week. We're going to be talking tomorrow about bills rising, but of course, for very many people with disabilities, that is a huge worry. And first time, Kevin, I've seen you since the Daily Mirror front page on Thursday. Bringing the deficit down on the backs of the poor.
Well, you can't balance the books on the backs of the poor, but that's what the government's trying to do. And the reason it's come up with $5 billion of cuts is it wants the figures to add up. If it was doing a comprehensive overall of how the welfare state works, how it helps people into work, helps people in work, looks after those who can't work, I'd be all for it. If there were an answer on the end of it, the two-child poverty cap, which puts hundreds of thousands of kids into poverty at the same time, you might be able to see a reason for it. But we know it's cheese paring, it's saving money, and a lot of people are concerned. And then we saw that that report that came out, 50,000 children. 50,000 children will be pushed into poverty. I think the overall figure was 250,000 people extra in poverty. Is that what Labour's about? Is that what Labour elected to do? I would suggest not.
I read the leading article in the Mirror that day too, which actually said what the Chancellor was doing was cruel. I never thought the Daily Mirror would be saying that about a Labour government 9 months into office.
But the challenge is, isn't it? Because, you know, this weekend, all these members of Parliament will be back in their constituencies. And we know that, you know, beneath all the billions of figures, every MP on average will have 1,000 people or more losing personal independence payments, 500 who currently get them will go. And out there, this is what we were talking about later, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who don't know whether they are the ones who are going to lose that financial support, thousands of pounds a year. And there's no clarity about this at the moment. What do you say if somebody says to you, will I lose my disability payments if you're an MP? I mean, they don't even have the answers.
And yeah, the truth is they probably won't know exactly until you see the full system, you drill down in the details. But they'll quite rightly be getting it from members of the public. People who are receiving the payments are frightened of losing them. They'll have had, I suspect, scores of resignations of local party members. I know one MP was telling me that was happening in her constituency, and this is going to go on and on and on. We've already had 2 bites of the cherry. Came in one set of cuts, and the sums didn't add up, so they came in with another set, and it's going to go on. David Cameron went through this in 2016, and he abandoned plans to change PIP. I remember it now. He was forced off. It wasn't kind of a Tory rebellion. It was the backlash. Why are you doing this? Why is this unfair? And you get examples of people, right? Because it's quite easy to say, oh, it's soaring. There's lots of people. Fiddling the system is the suggestion, because there is some public support for it, unquestionably, but you create that and then you get real people and you explain their circumstances and you cannot justify the cuts in those cases.
But there's 2 things I'd say here. Also, we're going to head into another vacuum now because we won't have a budget till November. There's going to be huge speculation as things happen internationally, such as tariffs from America, which could blow the Chancellor's calculations completely out the water. They're already teetering on a knife edge as to whether the numbers add up, and I don't think they do, which means are we going to have intense speculation right up to November of even more cuts? And I think that's what destabilised this government in the first place. They had such a long period before the budget, huge speculation. They were talking down the economy, and I don't think they've ever got a grip back again since. But I must say, the figures came out at the end of last week suggesting that, 25% of the population now regard themselves as disabled? Really? I find that figure staggering. 25%.
Presumably, a large number of mental health disabilities,
So a lot of people,
or as a result of the
because
pandemic.
of the pandemics. But I still find that figure pretty hard to comprehend.
But it's how you get to that figure.
And are they all claiming benefit as a result?
No.
Well, a lot of them
No, they're not.
Well,
No, they're not.
Kevin, which is why the benefits bill has soared 20 billion a year since the pandemic.
But they're not. But you've probably got in there people with hearing problems, people with sight problems. Doesn't mean you're blind, doesn't mean you're deaf.
A quarter of the country.
Have got something.
Sorry, I'm struggling with it.
Yeah, mental health problems account for 37% of new PIP awards, up from 28% before the pandemic, and are thought to account for a doubling of those under 40 years old starting on disability benefits. So the mental health pandemic is part of the reason for the increase in PIP.
But we also see that since COVID, deaths are up from suicide, drugs and alcohol.
Right.
Now, look, I'm all for resilience. You're going to have a mental health issue, but you carry on. You have a physical issue, you carry on. Most people who have mental health and physical issues do carry on. They still go to work, they still live a life. But you can sometimes acknowledge the problems now. It may be that younger people, we see not as many kids go to school now. They've just disappeared. There may be some younger people in the workforce who just, for whatever reason, think, I can't cope, I get anxious. Yeah, well, you've got to deal with that. But the cuts go much wider than that.
Today, the emphasis shifts to what we do about immigration and particularly illegal immigration. And I just point out that, this £33 million of funding has been announced by the Prime Minister to help set up an international unit of the Crown Prosecution Service that will smash the gangs. That was, the strategy.
Yeah, that went well.
People already getting in touch. William says, so £33 million to stop illegal immigrants. I'm sure that will be of comfort to pensioners and the disabled pushed into poverty by welfare cuts. I mean, presumably it's
That's
going to...
That's not understanding what the money's being spent on.
So the story needs to be told. If you can smash the gangs, then you stop illegal immigrants coming over and you can cut down, presumably, on the huge bill, which we have figures for, housing asylum seekers in hotels. According to the latest Home Office figures, do you know how much it costs a day?
8 million.
£8 million.
Staggering.
Amazing.
Staggering.
So I imagine the government would say to William, 33 million is a worthwhile investment if it means you're going to stop paying 8 million a day.
4 days of the hotel bill, and that's going to rise. And remember when they got in, they said they were going to take migrants out of these hotels. It was going to stop. They're having to expand the hotel spaces, which causes all sorts of problems in local communities because they're coming in ever greater numbers. And they're coming here because they know when they get here, they'll be put in hotels, they'll get board and lodge, and they'll almost certainly not be sent back. That's why they're coming here.
There's actually about as many people come and overstay their visas as coming on small boats.
Yes.
The big focus has always been on small boats, and small boats is a fraction of legal net migration. And those hotels were inherited because there was a huge backlash. You've got to, one, stop the sailings, then two, when people come across, you have to deal with them quickly, decide who has a legal right to stay. Majority are found to, actually, once they're here, and those who don't, then you have to remove them quickly. No, you didn't.
No, and you're not either.
And the government is attempting to get a grip of it now, but it is not
they've been in power
easy.
for 9 months. They were going to smash the gangs, having a summit today. More talking, £33 million is peanuts, and they're no nearer to smashing.
But you're aware of the deals on stopping the flow of the boats now. You're probably aware, or you might ignore the deals of taking people
that
back
there are
to
record numbers
Iraq.
coming into Britain across the Channel. Record numbers.
But you know why?
Labour got into power.
But why? The Home Secretary said
the weather's. Because it was true with the weather.
But it's true.
Wasn't that the case when the Tories were in power?
Well, it was.
The weather's nice.
It was. Yes.
But Labour mocked the Tories over that. Now the Tories are going to mock Labour for making the weather's nice. They can come in then.
They call them red days, and there's been 42 this year compared to 17 in the same period.
The number's going to go even
last week.
higher.
Well, if the weather is better, yes. So you've got to attempt to stop.
Control.
You've got to attempt
case,
to stop
Andrew,
the sailings.
You presumably would back the government when it says it's going to pay prosecutors to hunt down the people smugglers, because if you can hunt them down over on the mainland continent...
what I'd have done to start with was I'd have given Rwanda a try.
Well, we did give Rwanda a try. It cost us millions and no one got sent.
That's the only incredible thing you said today.
First thing we did was cancel it. We've got no deterrent at all at the moment.
You had 4.
No deterrent at all.
What happened to the numbers coming over the channel while the Rwanda stream was being set up? Well, they went up.
Yeah, and also...
And how many people went to Rwanda?
And how many people went from...
4 volunteers.
And Ed, how many people went from Northern Ireland to Southern Ireland because they were worried sick?
How many?
They might be deported.
How many?
Well, hundreds, apparently.
Yeah, you made that up.
No, I didn't.
Well, you don't know, though.
The fact is, there is no deterrent, and what we're going to have is another expensive talking shop today with the Prime Minister.
Or we could give it a chance.
But this is an interesting debate because surely you need to do two things. First of all, you do need to crack down on these illegal gangs.
Well, why don't they?
And they've got people
Well, why
at
don't
this
they?
summit from China.
Well,
and
why have
America.
well, they've been in power since July, Ed. What have they done about it?
Well, I mean, as I understand
what have they done?
There's been high
problem
full
is-
What have they done?
prosecutions and
Come on,
jailings.
I'm asking Ed. What have they done?
The problem is that the Germans...
What have they done?
OK, well, look, I mean...
You do nothing.
Do you, well,
That's the answer.
I have not even actually said anything.
OK, well, let's hear the answer.
The French Home Office Minister has said that they will change the law so that the French boats can, the French police can stop migrants in boats on the water from sailing over to Britain.
I thought
the
that's what
Germans have said that they will change the law in order to seize and actually go after the gangs for the boats and the engines which are in Germany. Both things have been said by the French and the Germans, haven't been said before. International cooperation, the right thing to do, but they haven't yet changed the law because these things take time. And at the moment, there isn't a government in Germany. So that's a good thing. Two things they've done.
How much are we paying the French already? Hundreds of millions of pounds. What are they doing with it? The police are just watching the migrants get in
Andrew,
the boats and they're waving goodbye
No, they're
saying,
not.
bon voyage, bon voyage. We've all seen the images. It is true, Kevin. We've all seen the images
I've just
of
told
it.
you two things they've done, right?
Right. Well, let's see when that changes then.
OK, so we agree they have done things.
Well,
and we need to wait to see whether they deliver changes.
Yeah.
Right. OK, so suddenly it feels as though rationality has returned and we're having a good conversation.
Right.
Well, there had been deportation flights to Vietnam. They hadn't been for several years.
Yeah, but why are Vietnamese people being allowed to cross the Channel in the first place?
But your good point is...
Vietnam is a very nice holiday resort.
But your good point is, in all this...
That's why they've been returned.
Can the crackdown on international crime do the job, or do you also need to have a deterrent as well?
Yeah.
And what is a credible deterrent? Everybody knows Rwanda wasn't a credible deterrent, and Rwanda now is in a big mess anyway. So what is the deterrent they ought to go after now?
What about Albania? Because apparently it's still a possibility that Albania could process our asylum seekers.
It sounds a bit similar to Rwanda to me.
But
The difference is in Rwanda, you handed over the legal responsibility for the decision-making to Rwanda, which was always absurd and never going to work. Whereas in the Albania case, what you do is you make the decisions and then you move it over to Albania for the processing or for people to be housed.
And how many are we going to send there?
I don't know. Good idea or bad idea?
Well, I just want it to stop there.
I
People want it to stop.
I
think it's a bad idea, Albania.
said that he regrets saying stop the boats because it turned out he failed to stop the boats.
Yes, failed to stop.
But the question is, what do you actually do about it?
He said again and again, we're going to smash the gangs. Haven't smashed the gangs.
But the deterrent is you are processed quickly. If you're found to be a refugee and you have a legal right to stay here, then you...
Whereas all these people in these hotels are not being processed at all.
But then you can go... so actually you have to process them quickly and then you can work. So you won't live in a hotel, you will earn a wage and pay your way. And then those people who are found not to have a right to be here because they're economic migrants rather than asylum seekers who are refugees, then those economic migrants are returned.
Andrew, I imagine
that's what you do.
You would probably back getting out of any convention which says that you are not entitled to stay here, but we'll give you a pass to stay here because your son doesn't like the chicken nuggets, which he would be served.
I think the chicken nuggets is a myth. If I read that, and the judge who talked about chicken nuggets said it doesn't mean you have a right to stay here. He rejected the appeal, the chicken nuggets. It's become a myth.
But the person was entitled to stay.
The Immigration Tribunal said
for the reasons.
Convention, which was an entitlement to family life.
Yeah, which is in UK law. But it wasn't chicken nuggets.
So it
was not chicken nuggets.
So apparently the judgment was partly related.
It was.
No, they've read. Whoever's whispering in your ear has read the Daily Telegraph. And if you go to the end of that Daily Telegraph front page, you will see the chicken nuggets was rejected.
Voice whispering in my ear. Are you getting this from the Daily Telegraph? Or are you getting it directly from the judgment? We'll double check.
What about
from the judgment? Says the editor.
Oh yeah. Well, the full.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't knock Ed Chalice.
All right, Ed. Sorry, Ed.
One the other day, the Pakistani paedophile who's an alcoholic who can't be sent back to Pakistan because it's a dry country. What astonishing, these decisions are astonishing, and they're driving people insane.
Yep.
It is insane.
And it's pretty clear the government thinks this is a problem.
It's unjust.
Yes.
And it's wrong, and it's an abuse.
Right. Should we talk about something else, which many people this morning will think is unjust and intolerable and perhaps even an abuse of power? This is the parents who were arrested after their child's primary school objected to the volume of emails they'd sent about the process for appointing a new head teacher and disparaging comments on a WhatsApp group. Just point out, these parents have 2 children at a primary school, one of whom has certain neurodivergent characteristics, including epilepsy, right? So a life-threatening condition in some cases. Imagine opening the door and you have 6 police officers on the doorstep. What would you think? What is your, as a parent,
Panic.
What is your first thought when a police officer turns up at the front door?
Panic.
They thought something had happened to their child.
Yeah.
In fact, they were being questioned on suspicion of harassment and malicious communications. Police eventually said there should be no further action. And we don't know the full totality of the emails or WhatsApp messages that they sent, and the school hasn't released them either. But my goodness, how bad could it be? It would have to be so dreadful that 6 police officers turn up.
It cannot be possibly proportionate to what they did.
No.
And by the way, the parent, the chap, I've known him for years. He's a radio producer for Times Radio. I worked with him at LBC. A completely thoroughly decent bloke.
Maxie Allen.
Maxie Allen, yeah.
Right.
I think he worked here. I think he worked here for a while too.
It's completely crackers.
It's completely nuts.
If they had sent round, if the school is being bombarded and they're destabilised, they don't know what to do, and they talk to the police,
But it's in a
and the
WhatsApp
police say, let's send round a liaison officer to have a word with the parents to find out what's going on, that would, makes sense. But 6 police officers in uniform, and they were arrested and held for 8 hours.
Unbelievable.
In a police cell?
Like they're criminals.
If I had 6 police officers turn up on the doorstep of my house, I'd think there's a major crime being committed. What's happening? Is somebody got in me garden, with a bomb or something? But a row between parents and school, won't dismiss that entirely, but there's got to be other ways to deal with that. I'd like to ask them, how many emails did they send? Talk about high volume. What did they say? But even if they're like sending 50 emails a day and getting a bit hot, I still don't think that would justify half a dozen police officers on a door.
People who get burgled and they never see a copper. People who get shoplifters, they're in a little shop and they get targeted by shops the whole time. They never see a copper. 6 police officers turning up to a nice couple upset about their kids'
What has happened in the last few years in Britain, which has meant we end up...
Lost the plot.
Why then?
And again, it's all this constant looking at online crime, alleged online crime.
Kevin,
it's completely out of proportion.
So my first instinct when this happened was, is it just because it's easy for the police? Like, you've got 2 crimes, right? You've got a burglary where you have 0 idea who the burglar is. You don't know where the goods are, and it's going to take a lot of police resources to track them down. And you've got a WhatsApp group and a whole load of emails right in front of you that you can investigate. That cannot possibly be. That is just my ignorant analysis. Yeah. But it was my instinctive analysis. It can't be true, can it?
Ticks a box. Another arrest.
Well, hang on a second. What box do they tick?
An arrest.
Investigating an allegation of a crime.
But then it turned out that there was no
crime.
No charge.
That's right.
No,
this was like and the publicity is terrible. I mean, isn't the reality, if you are local police, if you're neighbourhood police, and there is a problem with neighbours or with the school, then if you get a phone call, you have to find out what's going on.
Yeah,
The idea that you turn up with 6 police officers every time you get a complaint about antisocial behaviour from one neighbour to another,
it's appalling.
The allegation was, so there were questions on suspicion of harassment, malicious communications and causing a nuisance on the school.
8 hours in a police station. Who's looking after their kids?
But they are broad.
After their kids.
They are broad offences. So the police, when they turn up, they will talk. This is the area we're in. But if a school complains to the police, I think that has to be taken seriously by the police. We've had heads in recently in other cases. And I'm not saying this couple have been like that at all, but I can see the police will have to take it serious because there's been some breakdown, I think, in society that some parents, again, I'm not saying these, feel they can just abuse teachers and heads, go after them online, go to their houses and so on. So I see why the police would take it seriously. But I can't see why you would send 6 police officers round. It just it's ludicrous.
Ludicrous.
Absolutely
And
ludicrous.
I tell you,
as I, as a
someone
parent,
else-
will
yeah.
be
It's
furious.
disgusting.
But I'd love to see the emails. I'd love to see them all.
Someone else who thinks it's ludicrous, the Police and Crime Commissioner for
Yeah.
the force, said that the force should never have been involved in the first place. There has clearly been a fundamental breakdown in relationships between a school and parents that shouldn't have become a police
I agree with
matter. He said he was going to look into mediation services to help amicably resolve disputes
Blimey.
without police
Totally the right
involvement.
That sounds totally reasonable. But why is has the school overreached and got it wrong by going to the police when it should have been dealt
A
with?
spokesperson for the primary school said, we sought advice from the police following a high volume of direct correspondence and public social media posts from two parents, as this was becoming upsetting for staff, parents and governors. Well, that's interesting that the school says we sought advice. Did the school actually, if they sought advice, did the police then overreact?
Yeah, of course they did.
Or it was sought advice? Oh, we've got these problem parents. How do we deal with them? I'd like to see what the school said as well. It's where you know it's gone wrong, but it's quite where has it gone wrong to apportion the blame so it doesn't happen again.
We'll speak to the parents at 7:10 and find out what on earth they were writing that meant that the school had to get advice from the police, rather than just ringing up the parents and go, how can we deal with this?
Exactly.
Can I just also say, if you're in a closed WhatsApp group with other parents, aren't you allowed to criticise the school if you think there's something wrong with a school?
You most definitely are.
You shouldn't hound a teacher, but if you want to say this is a lousy school, then that's...
They don't like it, get out of WhatsApp.
Because somebody on the WhatsApp group is obviously then passed it on to the school.
Yeah,
and
pathetic.
Bing, bang, bong.
Parallel WhatsApp.
Right, shall we talk about Prince
Yes.
Harry and Meghan? Oh my, the outrage never ceases, does it? So, where do you want to start with this? Let's start with the fact that a source close to Prince Harry this morning has spoken to the Mail Online and said...
Baseless.
It's all baseless.
Baseless.
But yesterday, the chair of Sentebale, in an explosive interview, claimed donors dropped their support because of the prince's reputation after he quit his royal duties. She alleged Harry unleashed the Sussex machine on her in a case of harassment and bullying at scale. She claimed the prince nearly derailed a polo match, which was raising funds for Sentebale, because he insisted on bringing a Netflix camera crew, which meant that they had to find another location. And
On that one, who cares? A polo match.
Hang on, it's a big fundraiser.
It's a charity fundraiser, and he was going to commercialise it for his own personal benefit.
No, I'm not defending it. You sort of think, I can't get excited about polo matches.
No, but I can about fundraising. Look, polo's not my game. I get the VW car and the mint, and that's it. Right? People, with sticks on horses isn't my thing.
I could imagine Andrew playing polo then.
No.
Can you?
No.
Hey, one of those little hats?
No.
With a big stick?
No, you're taking the mick. It's a serious error by Harry.
Yes.
He was doing a Netflix series on polo and thought, here's a way.
It's definitely
commercialising his own charity.
You know where it's a collision between service, which you talked about, serving people, and self-service or self-interest, isn't it? That's what it is, where his self-interest was Netflix, where he's got that 80, 100 million quid
Kevin, I think it's
contract.
more fundamental. I think this is a charity that's in Africa. This chairwoman is a very experienced, clever black lawyer, and I think Zimbabwean, and she thinks these white, privileged men and women running this charity from London.
And she's complaining that they demanded that the charity go out and do media to defend Meghan.
Yeah.
She said that's not our job, and she's right about that.
She is, exactly. When Meghan appeared to try and push this chairwoman off the stage when a trophy was being handed over.
Do you think we've
hilarious.
Do you think we've had the whole story on this one yet?
Well, there's always two sides.
No, and
we haven't heard the second side.
Nobody comes out of it well.
But look,
particularly Sentebale, the charity, which has been enormously damaged by this.
Harry's not been shy of getting in front of a camera when it served his interest.
Right.
I would genuinely like to hear his version, not people briefing on his behalf who we don't know. I would really like him to give his side. She's given her side. I would really like to hear, because I thought it was sad when he quit as patron, because he'd founded the charity, honour of his mother, I think he actually genuinely believed it. There is an issue around white saviours, and as that time gone, should the charity now be run in Africa, raise money in Africa?
Yeah.
But he was a big plus. But is he toxic now because of the royal connection and the rift with his family?
Sources close to Prince Harry have hit back. And apparently they're saying the claims of bullying and harassment by the head of a charity he set up are baseless.
The explosive allegations in which Sentebale's chair, Dr. Sophie Chandauka, also criticised the Sussex PR machine followed the Duke's decision to step down as patron of the organisation. So has the Duke of Sussex actually become a risk to work with? Newsweek's chief royal correspondent Jack Royston says yes. Host of Where Politics Meets History podcast, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, says he is still valuable. Well, not to Sentebale, Dr. Dunlop.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that the one person who's finally managed to knock Donald Trump off the news is Prince Harry. Keep your main player on the pitch. We know celebrities are problematic. I dread to think what Ed Balls is like in the green room, but you keep your player on the pitch, and the chairperson of Sentebale has failed to do that.
OK, well, I'd just like to point out Ed Balls is lovely in the green room. But Jack Royston, chief royal correspondent for Newsweek, these are explosive allegations. To accuse Prince Harry, who himself has made allegations in an entire book about the way he was treated, about how his wife was treated, for him then to be accused of bullying and harassment
this looks like the toxicity is following Harry everywhere he goes. So there was the falling out with William and Kate and the staff at Kensington Palace. They were called grifters at Spotify. Then he's got this at Sentebale. His other African charity, African Parks, is facing very serious allegations about the conduct of its rangers. And then also, you know, the Netflix shows that they've been producing are getting absolutely pulverised by progressive magazines in America. You know, Time, Vanity Fair, Variety, New York Magazine. These are all magazines.
Can I just say, I'm not sure that the media and journalists criticising them is the same thing.
No, it's not.
As
it's different.
The chair of one of his charities criticising. That feels much closer to the bone, doesn't it?
And it is, but the problem is here, the only way that they're coming back to Sophie Chandauka is by attacking her. And that's not going to do anything to boost his reputation. It's mutually assured destruction.
Tessa, I mean, could you have a second go? Because I'm not sure I understood your defence of Prince Harry in the opening. He's knocked Donald Trump off the news, or we have.
No, but I think the point is he's a ginormous brand. He's a juggernaut of a brand. And actually, Sophie Chandauka talked about taking over as the chairperson, going back through the books and finding that the Sussex brand and its toxicity, i.e. when they left Britain, saw a slump in donors. At the same time, we have to recognise that courtesy of Harry's polo matches, etc., in fact, through the polo matches alone, he brings in £12 million. Spare donates £1 million to Sentebale from its profits. So Harry is incredibly profitable and actually harnessed in the right way. We believe in Harry as a philanthropist. Sure, he's got issues where he wants this life of service. So even if he's
toxic, it's still worth it.
But I don't think he is any more or less toxic than the chairperson with whom he's having a clash. What's interesting here is that it's blown out into the open because he's rescinded the patronage along with the Prince of Lesotho, along with the Board of Trustees. Who's on her own here? Actually, it's the chairperson. And her colleague, or one time erstwhile colleague, Trevor Phillips, I thought looked distinctly uncomfortable in that interview yesterday. But what she's done, given that she's launched complaints with the High Court and the Charity Commission, it's extraordinarily unprofessional, isn't it, to go and weaponise Harry's words against himself, you know, to take it publicly into the press. I was astonished she did this.
Just as toxic as your chair is not going to be good enough for other organisations that might want to work with Harry, because what they're aiming for is not toxic at all. No. And that's the problem that Harry's got, is nobody wants to work with a toxic person.
Sorry, Invictus, one of the great success stories of our time, now into its 11th year. I don't think we can say everything Harry touches turns to dust when you've got Invictus there.
Invictus is great, but if they're going... And they could lose the Netflix deal at any time. You know, they could lose...
No.
At any
Meghan's
time, and they
just been recommissioned. It was in the global top 10. I mean, I couldn't bear it. With Love Meghan, I couldn't work out what it was about. It's all about Californian perfection. But viewers sat down, hate it or love it, they watched it, Jack. You may not like that
They're
fact, but
going
it's
to
true.
need to be earning money for years to come.
And you're not, and I'm not.
But I'm not in the middle of a massive global PR crisis. I'm not disintegrating publicly for the benefit of viewers around the world. I mean, in America, people are absolutely loving watching them crash and burn.
Loving,
Jack,
hating them, clickety-click makes money.
So even if they're toxic, it's still OK?
I think that you will find Harry endures. I wonder if Sentebale, eventually she will cease being the chairperson, and I think it might come back.
Isn't Sentebale finished now?
No, not yet. Well, if you listen to Sophie yesterday, it's got 500+ employees, and she's moving forward with
But
wealth.
without Harry and the Prince, what
and
is it?
climate. I think one of the key issues here is actually she wanted to take the charity down a more progressive direction, and he was still in the white saviour model, and that does need to be looked at. Harry
Jack,
needs to move with the times.
Do you think Prince Harry will need to come out and say something publicly about this?
He's got to be so careful if he says anything, because whatever he says about her, she will come back and throw more allegations at him. So what they're locked in at the moment is an escalating conflict, and the only way to end escalating conflicts is to stop escalating.
Yeah.
So
they need to talk to each other.
They need to talk to each other
Okay.
privately.
OK, thank you both very much indeed. Has Prince Harry become a risk to work with? 63% of you say yes.
The Prime Minister is today hosting a summit for 40 countries to step up the fight against what he calls the vile trade of people smuggling.
So Keir Starmer is going to urge those attending to work together to stop smuggling gangs in the same way they combat terrorists. Border Security Minister Dame Angela Eagle joins us from Westminster. Very good morning to you. Well, we've got a record number of people crossing the channel. We heard you say when you came to power you're going to smash the gangs. We're 9 months in, but we're still housing asylum seekers at the cost to taxpayers of more than £8 million a day. How can you actually get action on this today? What's the plan?
Well, this is a global trade, and it crosses many jurisdictions and borders. And so we have to cooperate much more, both operationally and politically and diplomatically, to deal with these transnational issues. And that is what today's summit, which has got 40 countries at it, as you've just rightly said, is aiming to do. We've got debates today amongst the interior ministers of countries, and then tomorrow is an operational day where border security
so can I just
colleagues will be talking about much more practical things.
OK, so for instance, the top 10 countries of origin for asylum claimants last year was at the top Pakistan, 10,000 claiming asylum. How many of those would have come on small boats, do you think?
Not very many come across on small boats. Each country is different, but with Pakistan, it's often visa overstayers who claim asylum.
And what are you doing on that?
Well, we're looking. Each country is different, but if we think that the visa systems are being abused, then we have to tighten them up, and we do that and have discussions with countries. Pakistan is represented, I think, today, and so diplomatically we keep all options under review if we think that there is abuse going on.
So which country are people predominantly coming from who then get into the boats and get organised by these gangs you're trying to smash?
Well, it varies from year to year. So, for example, in the first half of last year, it was Vietnamese.
OK, so what are you telling Vietnam? Because presumably today you're going to say to these countries, don't let your people leave and get in these boats. So what are you going to do with Vietnam? It's, it's a very popular tourist destination.
We've worked very closely with the Vietnamese authorities, and we've got some of these numbers down. We're working with them on good returns agreements, so we send people back. But also, there's an issue there about the advertisements. So we've just launched an advertising blitz on Zalo, which is a Vietnamese platform, to try to get to the people who are being sold lies about what awaits them if they come to the UK. We also often find that Vietnamese people are essentially smuggled over in debt bondage and find themselves put to work in sex work nail bars, growing cannabis in the hands of vicious, violent gangs. And so there's a policing issue there, there's a protection issue there, and there's also a returns issue.
I mean, there is an issue, isn't there, about, of course, tackling the gangs. But if people get here, at the moment, in tens of thousands, they're put up in hotels and we pay for them. And I just wonder, don't you need more deterrence? Doesn't it need to be tougher for people if they come here and then fail to get their asylum?
I mean, I think the ultimate issue is that we've got to make the system faster from end to end, fair, but much faster, and then we've got to return the people who fail. Now, this government has returned 19,000 people in its first 9 months in office. That is actually more than was returned in any year of the last Parliament. So we're ramping up returns. We're also ramping up visits to crack down on illegal working, arresting people there and fining employers who are employing workers illegally, often in sweatshop-style conditions. There's a 60,000 fine for every illegal worker, and we're making some announcements today about extending those right-to-work checks. So we are trying to crack down on that.
I guess the question in my mind is, you've got China there and America at the conference. I don't know what the Chinese do, but in America, ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency, they're very tough. The conditions they keep people in are very harsh. I just wonder whether, are we just too soft? Do we need to toughen up the way in which we keep people if they fail their asylum claims, rather than paying for them to be in hotels?
Well, they're not paid to be in hotels if they fail their asylum claims. I think it's important
that... tens of thousands, because you can't get rid of them. I mean, there are all these people who have not had their asylum claim not only processed, but even if they are, if you can't send them back to another country, we pay for them in quite, comfortable conditions to live for years.
No, we try to return every single person. I think that
but you don't.
Each jurisdiction has to do what it thinks is necessary in its own particular country. But I think the things we have in common and what the summit is going to be talking about today is the gangs, who they are, how we can deal with them, how we can introduce things like counter-terrorist powers in the border security bill currently before Parliament to make sure that we can disrupt them much earlier. The announcements today about international crime prosecution monies so that we can ensure that the prosecutorial authorities in other jurisdictions have the information that we gather that they can use as evidence in an appropriate way, so we can start arresting people. That's the important thing.
All right. Dame Angela Regal, just a quick one before we let you go. I imagine that you're being contacted by constituents who are worried about their PIP payments. What are you saying to them when they say, I have no idea how my payment is going to be cut or even withdrawn?
Well, the first thing to say about this is obviously people are very worried because of some of the coverage of this, and it's important to emphasise that each case will be looked on its merits, and those that really can't work won't be required to work and will actually get increased payments. But I think we're the only country in the G7 whose employment of people of working age levels haven't returned to pre-pandemic levels, and we've got to look at why that is and see what we can do to assist people to get back into work. You're far more likely to get out of poverty if you do get back into work, and so it's important to get the balance right, and I know that my own constituents, some of whom are feeling very, very worried about this, and we need to give them reassurance that their case will be looked at on its merits.
But in your constituency, there's going to be more than 500 people, if you're an average constituency, who will lose their personal independence payments, £4,000 a year. There'll be about 250 people in your constituency who will also lose carers allowance. That ends up for a couple £8,000 a year. Do all of those 500 people in your constituency, are they all at the moment not working and they should be?
Well, I mean, we know that personal independence payments aren't an out-of-work benefit, so it's impossible to generalise about those people, which is why it's important to say that each case will be looked upon on its merits, and there's a £1 billion fund to help people get back into work if they've got the capacity to do so, and increase payments for those who don't.
OK.
We are joined by GB News presenter, the Mail's consultant editor and all-round good thing, Andrew Pearce, and the Mirror's Kevin Maguire.
He doesn't agree with that.
No.
Also all-round good thing.
No,
Well, I don't
agree with that
mind
either.
not, but you know,
Yeah.
blimey.
I just love reading out this long title. Consultant, everything.
Yeah.
Are you filled with confidence about today's summit of all these different countries? What can we possibly offer, for instance, Vietnam,
don't think that, do you?
Hotter, I do.
to
But
stop...
that's so negative.
Yeah. I also think 33 million is peanuts, which is what we're allocating to assist. We're going to send lawyers to help police forces around the world. 33 million when we're spending £8 million
Isn't
a
countries
day
working together to
on
sort out a global
migrant
problem a good
hotels.
thing?
Well, I think,
It's the only answer.
It's a talking shop and it's a stunt and it's a gimmick.
It's a very small amount, you're right. And is it going to resolve the issue? No. But can it play a part? Possibly. And you've got to try every avenue.
It's all down to the weather, according to the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
If it's calm. No, she said so.
No. You get the sailings when the weather's good, obviously, but you've got to stop the sailings.
We're going to get a lot more of that
But
because
I'm
the weather's
just
going to
not
get better.
sure what we're going to do, what the money is going to go towards. If you are someone in Vietnam who is absolutely determined, you've seen a TikTok, and you're absolutely determined to get across to the UK, I'm just not sure what actual power £33 million is going to pay for.
In Vietnam, the big deterrent will be the deportations and the flights that have taken place over recent months.
Which the minister said they were making progress
But we
with.
pay France about £500 million.
We do.
Over a period of time to fund police investigations. And boats are turned back.
Not
but
many.
of course, and they're punctured, they're made unusable,
enough.
but then more boats come in. Because there's big money to be made, because people want to come to Britain. And people want to come to Britain is a tribute to Britain. That people want to come here and make their lives... we've got to halt the sailings. I'm not disputing that.
They come here because we're a soft touch.
But it's not because we're a soft...
We are.
We're not a soft touch. Although we do have a deregulated labour market. You're against more regulation of the labour market, while other European countries have much tougher regulation, so it's harder to work.
Ed raised the prospect, because we know from stories we covered here on the programme that if you are suspected to be an illegal immigrant in America... Because we spoke to the parents of a young student who was held in an ICE detention centre. It's a very different system over there. It's much tougher. We've seen some of the deportations to South American prisons, which are pretty grim. Should we be toughening up? I mean, I think I don't know about you, Andrew, but I think there's a sense of... I think that would be going a little bit too far if we decided to get that much tougher on the way we hold people. The American system seems inhumane.
We put them in hotels, and
yes.
It's £149 a day per migrant, so that's quite a nice life.
So we are too welcoming, too generous, and too soft. Kevin, is the answer to be tougher?
You've got to make this... Yes, in the sense of making the system work.
Progress.
No. But if people are...
My word.
If people are asylum seekers, refugees from somewhere like Afghanistan, then they have a right to stay. If you're coming over from, say, Vietnam, you'll be returned. And you need to do it quicker. Of course you need, but you have to clear the backlog that was inherited. Labour had this problem in '97. Jack Straw was Home Secretary, and it took some years to get the figures down, because you can't do it overnight.
The backlog's getting bigger because record numbers are now crossing the channel. Record numbers.
But it's important to say we do return people, and we have far fewer people coming as refugees and asylum seekers, because we make it very difficult, than most other European countries, never mind around the world.
Let's talk about welfare cuts. Dame Angela Eagle did seem to suggest, even though PIP is not an employment-related benefit, it is an amount of money that you are given because being disabled costs more. She did seem to suggest it's all about encouraging more disabled people to work.
Well, as we talked earlier, how have we got to this extraordinary figure that 25% of us now claim they are disabled? I don't believe the figure. I find it unrealistic, and I think too many people are claiming benefits. And why don't they make more of this? This is why they are cutting benefits. I
totally agree with you.
To get people who shouldn't be on benefits off of benefits.
I totally agree on the numbers and the huge rise.
You don't believe the figure either?
No.
Quarter of the country is disabled?
I agree with you that it's gone up too much and it's a problem. But the problem with disability benefits and these issues is if you're a member of Parliament, if you're the government, if you're you and me, you have to deal with each case. So in the case of David, who we interviewed earlier, if David loses his personal independence payment and he's destitute, we're saying to him, David, sorry, we're taking your money away because you should work, even despite your multiple sclerosis, even though his driving job is gone. And if we can look David in the eye and say, no, you must work, then OK, we take away his money. But there are 800,000 people who are going to lose this money. Can all 800,000 of them go to work? Is the answer is yes, fine.
Part of the problem, I think, is so many of the assessments now are done by telephone. And they should be more face-to-face so people can see.
But you would tell David, who was on it earlier...
No, David is a genuine case.
Yeah, but if he loses his money, he thinks he's going to lose his money because he's not going to get to category 4.
And it's an enormous number.
I know, but if he... Well, yeah, but I thought we were trying to get people off PIP.
Yeah, because there are people who shouldn't be on it.
But David is the case. Should David lose his money?
Well, what I'm saying is I don't accept that.
No, the answer is no.
I think no as well.
I don't accept quarter of this country is now disabled and claiming benefits.
I agree with that.
A quarter are not claiming benefits. Then a quarter are not claiming benefits. You've got a quarter of the country
billion
say there's something wrong with it. They're not all on benefits. No.
The benefits bill is soaring higher and higher and higher.
Are we telling David to go to work?
People like David clearly can't.
Actually, if you found something David could do and is able, and you could find somebody who would employ him and would pay him, then that would be great. I know a lot of people who are disabled and they work.